MAGA leaders today are afraid that after all of this chaos, voters won't be choosing them in the midterm elections next year. So they've decided to choose their voters instead. And that starts right here in Texas with Texas Republicans who are trying to keep the U.S. House under MAGA control by stealing 5 seats for their party. For a few months now, Donald Trump has been pressuring Governor Abbott and our legislature to redraw new voting districts here in Texas. In fact, after the flood, while hundreds of Texans were still missing and FEMA was asleep at the wheel, Trump said he would steal 5 more seats.
Are you calling then for a complete redrawing of the congressional map ahead of next year?
Just a very simple redrawing. We pick up 5 seats. But we have a couple of other states where we'll pick up seats also.
And even though this is only supposed to happen every 10 years, we just did it a few years ago, Abbott has agreed to do a special session to get some more congressional seats for his boss in Mar-a-Lago. It's called gerrymandering. That's when voting districts are drawn not for common sense reasons like county or river borders or ensuring that everyone is fairly represented, but for the explicit purpose of giving one political party an unfair advantage over the other. We saw the first draft of this Texas GOP plan earlier this week, and it's every bit the abomination that you'd expect from these guys. They took Donald Trump's marching orders and drew up a map that looks like this. They've drawn new lines that specifically target Democratic seats in Houston, Austin, Dallas, and on the border. And worst of all, they're explicitly and deliberately targeting minorities. So what will all this gerrymandering mean? It means that if you're a voter who's fed up about the nearly 2 million Texans who are going to lose their health care, or about ICE snatching people off the street and sending them to secret prisons, or about Trump's unconstitutional tariff taxes, you might not get a fair shot at choosing something better. Because the reality is, gerrymandering works, and Republicans know exactly how to do this, and they can all but guarantee that they will win the seats that they choose to steal. By voting percentages, Republicans should have 21 of the 38 congressional seats in this last election. Instead, they've already gerrymandered it to where they have 25 seats, and this new outrageous plan will give them 30 out of 38. MAGA Republicans are hanging on to their majority in the House by a thread. The handful of seats that they steal next year by this gerrymandering scheme could mean the difference between them keeping power or Democrats taking the House, where they will finally exercise the checks and balances that the Constitution demands. But Greg Abbott has been out there saying, oh, it's not about that.
There's been criticism of you saying you're letting President Trump call the shots.
Listen, people are always going to lodge criticisms. I'm not worried about stuff like that.
That is a lie. This is about pure, raw political power. That is all this is. I support the Democratic leaders in states who are already saying that they're willing to fight fire with fire. That if the Texas GOP goes ahead with this plan to steal these seats, they'll push a plan in their state to return the favor and then some. MAGA leaders need to know that Democrats aren't going to unilaterally disarm, and we need to show that we have the power and the will to fight back. You know, I used to fly F-16s in the Air Force, and one of my missions when I was based in Europe was the nuclear mission. And I never had to drop a nuclear weapon because Russia knew that if they dropped one bomb on us, we'd come right back and drop 10 on them. It's called deterrence. MAGA lawmakers have spent decades using their political power to make moves like this possible. 6 years ago, a partisan Supreme Court cleared the way for this disaster that we're seeing now when they ruled that federal courts couldn't prevent this kind of partisan gerrymandering. And the conservative majority on the Supreme Court that allowed that to happen exists because Democrats lost a presidential election in 2016, yes, but let's not forget that it also exists because hyper-partisan senators stole a Supreme Court seat by refusing to let Barack Obama do his constitutional duty and nominate a Supreme Court justice when a vacancy came up in his final year in office. And you might have guessed by now that one of those hyper-partisan senators was John Cornin himself. When Democrats said we need to have confirmation hearings for the Supreme Court justice that year, John Cornin called those a waste of time and defended the GOP plan to run out the clock on the Obama presidency, and their plan worked, and now we have a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. Elections have consequences, big consequences, and we need a person in John Cornyn's seat who cares more about your right to vote than they do about rigging the system for their team. And I'm running in this race because I know that we can win this seat. The next senator from Texas will have a direct impact on this fundamental right of Texans to choose their representatives. And if it's John Cornin or Ken Paxton, many Texans will lose that right, which is why we have to get this right. We have to nominate the right candidate who can win next November, and I'm ready for that fight.